afternoon, good evening, and good night. You're here with host Kyle of Windy City Meeples, and I'm here today to do a deep dive on one of my favorite games, Aeon's End. Bear with me, we're about to dig in. So, why do I love this game so much? This game is a challenging, cooperative deck builder by Indie Boards and Cards with key designer Kevin Riley. This game I found out about a year ago, and it just lit up everything I looked for in a game. It had the deck builder management style with a little bit less randomness, with fighting these epic bosses that are scary and monstrous and really feel like you're at the edge of your seat on whether or not you're going to win. The first boss is what we have set up here. I'm going to run through a couple turns just so you can kind of see how it flows, and I'll talk more about some of the mechanics and stuff as we dig in. And then later, I'm actually going to do an unboxing of Aeon's End Outcast, which was last year's Kickstarter that recently got delivered last fall. And just today, so it might be a while since this gets posted, but they have the next version of Aeon's End, Legacy of Greathold, which is the coming together of this epic story that's been told over years. In this game, you have portal mages. You have these mages that are defending the town, defending the last stitch of humanity. And these characters, tons of them. Each game kind of comes with so many. And the cool thing is each expansion or update, big box of this game, can have new versions of those characters. So Zaxos here, he's kind of one of my favorites. Story-wise, there's a lot that goes on with him. Falling over, but there's two different versions of Zaxos here. And as the games and expansions changes, kind of so is his abilities. And again, every time you play, you have so many different mages to choose from that add a lot of different replayability and different abilities. At the same point, for a boss battler, you need a boss to fight. So there are several different bosses that kind of come in the game. This guy here, the Cloak of Magnus, this dragon-looking guy, the Crooked Mask. He's a really interesting one, really change up the gameplay. So each one of these bosses will have a certain amount of health and something unique about them as you kind of fight and challenge your way to hopefully defend the city. So I talked about defending the city. There's a couple different ways you can lose this game. The first is your city health. Your city health is set to 30 points, and throughout events in the game, it can take damage. If Gravehold itself hits 0, you have lost the game. The other way you get eliminated is if both your mages end up getting knocked out or KO'd. Today we have Brahma, the Breach Elder here. She's great at healing up the city, a good way to protect yourself. As well as Mist, our daring captain. Each character is unique in that they'll have different starting cards, and they have an ultimate ability that you can charge up towards that will change the way the character plays. For instance, the ultimate on this character allows any ally to draw 4 cards, really allowing you to kind of soup up for some big turns. And like I mentioned before, Brahma herself, she's a healer. Nice to have that in there. Just if your town is taking hits, you can kind of build yourself back up. So what I've set up here is kind of a mini version of what you'd have normally set up with the game. You have your boss, and the first boss in the first copy of this game is called the Rageborn. Pretty basic going monster, definitely one of the easiest ones in the core box. Now, these definitely get a lot more challenging as the boxes go on, but for tutorial's sake, probably the easiest guy to set up. And again, this is kind of that first edition artwork. You'll see the artwork kind of change as the editions kind of go along. But again, fantastic game, lots of immersion. So I'm going to put this guy down here. Each one of these bosses will have their own special setup instructions. For this guy, he gets a strike deck. So he essentially is building up a rage meter, and when his rage is released, it's going to activate one of these extra cards. So that's kind of the unique thing about him. But how do we play? So again, at the core, this is a deck builder where you're fighting a boss. We have the boss health, 70 here. When he is defeated, you've won the game. The other way you can win the game is basically to exhaust the monster, and that would be surviving and going through his entire deck of cards. I've never won this way yet. To me, it seems like a boring way to win. But if you can withstand all these attacks, because you start off with level 1 cards, going to level 2 cards, going to level 3 cards. So this stuff gets way more nasty as the game goes on. So very difficult to outlast it. What makes this different than any other deck builder? First of all, and probably my favorite thing, is there's no shuffling. So you have your deck of cards. Once you go through your deck and it's fully in your discard pile, you say, I need my new deck again. Well, you take your discard pile and you flip it over. And there's your deck for the next turn. Why is this unique? Well, as you start gaining and playing different cards, at the end of your turn, you take your entire hand that you've used that turn, and you get to decide how that goes into your discard pile. So you have spells. Maybe you want to get more attacks. So you want to make sure they're at the bottom. So when you flip it over, they'll be at the top. Maybe you need more crystal or more aether to help you build and buy more items. So maybe you want those at the bottom of the pile. So again, when you flip it over, you'll have those on top. So it really helps you to set up and build unique combos. The other thing is there's no, I'll take a turn, you take a turn, boss takes a turn. There's a little bit of uniqueness when it comes to the boss battling deck. And that is what you have known as your turn order cards. So the Nemesis is your big bad guy. You'll see his card here. There's a couple of them in here. There's 2 Nemesis ones. There's 2 player 1 cards, and there's 2 player 2 cards. Every round you'll shuffle these up, and then at the start of the round, you'll flip it over and decide who gets to go first. This is such a unique and amazing part of this game. There's so many games me and my wife have played where we're both kind of at 1 or 2 health, and the boss is down to its last like 5 or 6 health. We shuffle out that turn deck and we're like, okay, as long as we go before, this Rageborn, we got him defeated. But if he goes before us, we're defeated. So there's a little bit of that luck of the draw, but really, we've also put ourselves in those situations. We've had some games where we've done really well and just comboed our cards, and we're kind of laughing near the end of it. But those games are few and far between. I'd say at least 70% of the games I've played of Aeon's End come down to that last round and really what those cards flip up. So it's no walk in the park, but it's super fun and engaging. Now, normally you would have a bigger market. My market pile I have up here, you're going to have 3 gems, 3 spells, and 2 relics traditionally in a game. Now, each box is going to come with dozens of different spells, relics, and gems. So there's so much replayability here in how you build your market. There can be a starting market that's suggested for your first time playthrough, but really you can kind of randomize, you can pick your favorites, you can just kind of, let's put our hands in the box and see what we pull out. So for the example of this, because we're not going to play through the entire boss battle, I've chose 1 relic, 1 spell, and 1 gem. And I'll speak about these. Gems here, most traditionally, I know we're not going to be able to see the text there, but they're going to allow you to build up your resources or your money, your ether, whatever you want to call it, to be able to have bigger turns in the future. Sometimes they will have a secondary ability on them, but their main goal is to help you get resources. Your next area of cards are your spell cards. Now, spell cards, again, are often designed to do damage. So this is how you beat those bosses. Again, you guys are mages, and you're trying to use your magic powers to destroy these bosses that are threatening the last standpoint of humanity. So spells, again, very important. And again, sometimes they will have additional effects that might say to heal 1 or something of that effect. Now, your other category are your relics. And I'd almost say these are your wild cards. Different relics can do different things. Some can give you resources. Some allow you to play spells earlier. Some allow you to heal. Again, each relic is very different. And we'll kind of talk about these cards as they come up a little bit more. So on your turn, you get a hand of 5. You're going to play your entire hand if you want to. Get whatever spells you need to do. Buy things from the market. Do some damage to the boss. And you'll keep going like that. You'll build your deck. You'll obviously get a lot stronger as you go through. A couple unique things to talk about. You have these spell slots. These are called your breaches. Most characters will always start with the first breach open. This means you can play a spell on it. And you can't just throw a spell out of midair. Spells take a while to prepare. So on your turn, you'll lay a spell card on an open breach. And on your next turn, at the start of your turn, is when you'll cast it to do the damage. So there's kind of a one-turn delay in actually doing the damage of your spells. To get the rest of these open, you have to do what's called focusing. And focusing usually will give you a certain money amount. So for here, it says 2 energy to focus. And with a focus, you will turn the whole tile clockwise. And you'll see as it starts to turn, you will find a lower amount of resources required to focus and a lower amount to open. The cheapest it will be is when the yellow symbol is all the way up at the top, allowing you just to pay 2 resources to open. Once a breach is open, you flip it to its opposite side, and now you'll have extra spots to play spells. Whenever you focus a breach and actually turn it sideways, you'll also be allowed to play 1 spell on it for that turn. And this will be a way to allow you to do multiple spells in a turn before all your breaches are open. So that is a lot of background information. Let's see what a couple turns look like. So at the beginning of a player turn, or at the beginning of a round, we're going to flip over our card, and it says player 1 goes first. I chose before the game started that Brahma here is player 1, and she has 10 health. The game comes with a lot of little cubes to keep the stuff organized. I just prefer using simple D20s just because I find it takes up less space, a little easier to handle. So on your turn, you'll draw 5 cards. And you'll look at what you have. So for Brahma, she's got a ton of crystals here to gain some aether, some resources, and she's got 1 spell. So like I mentioned, spells take a turn to build up. So the first thing we're going to do, we only have 1 spell in our hand, so the choice is really simple. We're going to lay down our spell on our breach and prep that. So again, we have to wait till next turn before we can do that damage. The other thing we know is we have 4 resources. Each one of these crystals give 1. So we're going to use those for 4 resources. Now, I mentioned before a while ago, your character has unique special ability. You see they take charge slots. So each one of these will take 2 resources. Once she hits 5 and finishes that off, she can then remove them all to do that ability. So that says any player gains 4 life. That's great. We're not really needing that right now. I'd rather build my deck. So instead of gaining 2 charges, which would be, again, 2 points each, we're going to use our 4 to go up to the market. We had the gems we talked about before, the spells, and the relics. Well, Brahma's been around for a long time. She doesn't want to cut corners. She wants to get right to doing damage. So we're going to grab this card called Jagged Lightning. And if it would show up better, it says, deal 3 damage. I may discard a card in my hand. If I do, I can focus any player's breaches that are closed with the lowest focus cost. So again, most spells do some type of damage and then might have an extra effect. That card, once it's bought, goes into the discard pile, and then the cards I used for that turn will go into the discard pile as well. So now when I have to refresh my deck and flip it over, you'll notice that new card we just bought will be the first one on top. So that's the end of Brahma's turn. She had no spell to cast at the beginning, and then she's played out her cards. If you had a card in your hand you wanted to save for the next turn, you can do that. At the end of your turn, you'll always draw back up to 5. Keeping 1 extra basic crystal wouldn't have mattered, but had we bought the 3-cost gem here, we would have had 1 left. I probably would have discarded it just to make it quicker to get at that new spell that we bought. So at the end of the turn, she will pick up 5 new cards. So that'll be Brahma's turn when her card flips over again. So the next card here, we lucked out. Player 2. So player 2 gets to go, which will be missed over here. And she will get to take her turn. You could find out, depending on how that round thing shuffles, you as the players could get 4 turns in a row before the enemy acts at all. Then the enemy is getting 2 turns back to back. You could have a round where the enemy goes twice and you're waiting, right? So these things can really set up kind of the give and take with building up this struggle. So it's Miss turn over here. So she will take her 5 cards. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right. She as well only has 1 spell card in her hand. It's a spark, deals 1 damage, just a very basic starting spell. So we're going to go ahead and put that over here on her breach. The next thing she can do, she's got 3 resources here, 3 crystals. We're going to start by using those. And I think we're going to gain a gem. So this gem now will count towards 2 resources, or 2 ether. Now you see those other crystals we were playing only had 1. So this is really nice. It's going to let me get to bigger spells in the market a lot quicker. This card also has the unique text that says, you may place the next card you gain this turn on the top of your deck. So once I play this card later on, if I use it to buy a card, instead of putting that card in my discard, I can go right on the top of the deck, right into my next turn. So we're going to go ahead and buy that, which we'll put at the bottom of the discard. Now my other ability here is I can either gain 1 more resource, or I can cast any player's prep spell. Well, 1 resource at this point isn't going to do much. I can cast a prep spell of another ally, so I could use the spell here from Brahma, but Brahma's spell also lets her gain resources for that turn. So casting it now is probably going to maybe throw off Brahma's turn. So what I'm actually going to do is hold on to this card in my hand. So for Mist, now she is going to draw 4 more cards, going up to 5. All right, what's next? Well, we go back to that turn marker card. All right, so we have a Nemesis card. So the big baddie's finally going to do his thing. When the bad guy comes into effect, you're going to look to see if he has any ongoing current abilities or minions, and you'll trigger those first. After that, you'll flip over a new card and apply the effects. So this one says, Unrelenting Ire, Unleash. If there are 2 Nemesis turn order cards in the discard pile, he unleashes 2 extra times. Unleash is the mechanic that each monster will have special to them. So for this Rageborn, when he unleashes, he gets a Fury counter on him, and at 4 is when he rages out and uses that strike deck we mentioned earlier. So this is a pretty, level 1 cards again can start off a little bit easier. You'll see in the corner there, there's a little tiny 1 down there. So again, they start off gentle, but they get intense really fast. So he gets a rage token on him. 1 rage token, not a big deal. There's only 1 Nemesis card in here, so nothing else happens. It's a pretty minor turn for him. So we'll flip over again. Player 2. So it's actually Mrs. turn again before Brahma's. So we're going to take a look at her hand. See, now she's got 2 spells, and before she plays anything, you need to check your prep spell area. She has this spark that has now sat there for an entire turn round, so she can now cast it. You don't have to play your prep spells, but they are going to sit there taking that slot. However, sometimes if they have a heal effect or something else on them, maybe you want to save them till the next turn cycle. But right now, Mist will go ahead and she will cast her spark, which has deal 1 damage, which will go to her discard pile. So you take the boss's counter. That's at 70 health, and he's down to 69. So we've started. We've started to fight the Rageborn. All right, so like I said before, she had those 2 spell cards. So the first thing she'll do is place 1 to her breach. Well, this is a more interesting dynamic because we can try to play someone's prep spell. Again, we don't want to do that. So we can gain 3 resources here, allowing us to buy maybe another gem or a spell. But I'm going to show you guys that focus action I was talking about. So if I look at her other breach here, I can pay 2 points to focus it, getting it 1 closer to open. Or it says I can play 3 just to straight up open this guy. So I actually think that's what I'm going to do, is I'll use my 3 resources from these cards here. And we're just going to go ahead and open our second breach. Again, this is important so you can start putting more than 1 spell down per turn. So now she's got 2 sparks in play. On her next turn, she'll be able to do 2 strikes, which is awesome because that damage can really start to snowball. So again, that would be her turn. She has 1 card left in her deck. She'll pick up that 1 card. She'll then flip over her discard pile and pick up to 5 cards. And now we have that new gem. So she could potentially have a really big money turn. But you'll see now by the way I discarded this, she has no spells. So yes, she'll have a lot more money and resources, Aether, but she won't be able to cast a spell this time. So I probably should have set up my discard pile a little bit better to have a spark in there or some other kind of spell. Now we'll flip over the turn order deck. Player 1. So back to Brahma, our eldest mage. And this lets us know that we know that last card is a Nemesis. So she has her hand. Right. She has 3 gems and 2 spells. Well, the first thing we want to do is look again to our cast spells. So Buried Light says she can do 1 damage and gain 1 resource, so 1 Aether. So that will go into the discard pile right away. But she'll do 1 damage to our big boss guy, putting him down to 68. She's going to look at her hand then. So same thing. She's got 3 gems, 2 spells, and she's got that 1 extra that her Buried Light provided still. So I think what we're going to do is use that 1 extra and 1 gem, giving us 2. And we're actually going to put a charge counter on our special ability down here. And again, once this gets full, she can then do her ability to have any player gain 4 health. Pretty good, because you can start losing damage very quickly. So what does she have left? Well, she's got these sparks, so we're obviously going to play 1 down to her open breach. Now she's got 2 crystals and 1 more spark. So she could focus her extra breach here, allowing her to play another spell down. But for whatever reason, this player is not big on doing extra damage right now. So she could take these 2 here and do another focus. But we're going to buy the Relic, which is the last card we have yet to go into detail about. So she's going to buy this Relic. And it says Mage's Totem. It's really cool. All the arts for the spells will usually connect to one of the mages in the game. And this here is actually missed on this one, but it's Brahma buying it. Again, you're not locked into where the pitchers meet. Now this card says, destroy a gem or relic you've played this turn, or I can destroy the Mage's Totem for the Gravehold to gain 1 life. So I can use this to have Gravehold regain its health, or to destroy a gem. Now, if you guys aren't familiar with deck building, you say, well, why do I want to destroy my cards? Well, destroying your cards is one of my favorite mechanics in deck builders. It allows you to get rid of your starting crystals out of your deck, so every other card is more powerful. You might want to get rid of your sparks, so all the spells you come up with are more powerful. And the shorter your deck is, or the smaller your deck is, the more likely you will be to see the cards you actually want to see. So, because she bought it, it's going to go to the discard first. And then everything she played that turn goes into the discard in whatever order you'd like. She had 1 spark left in her hand. So this is where I could choose to have no choice in this case. You can't just play it like a gem. So she has to hold on to this till her next turn. So she will flip over her discard. And she will grab 4 more cards. 1, 2, 3, 4. to go along with the card that was already in her hand. So we'll do one last Nemesis turn here, and then I think that's definitely enough of an overview. I could play through the entire boss, and this 2-turn cycle has taken a long time, but I've been explaining things as we go, quite in depth. You'll see as these cards start flowing out, you start taking these turns, it actually goes fairly quick, with the hardest choice usually being deciding what thing to buy, because again, we only had 3 examples here where normally there's 9, or deciding, are you going to fight the boss, or are you going to maybe affect some of the minions. So our last card is that Nemesis card, so we'll cover that. They take another turn. All right, so this is a minion card. So the minions have their own separate health. This guy says he has 5, and he goes down. And I'll use a dice to mark him with 5 health. And he says persistent, which means every time the Nemesis comes back, if he's still alive, he will do this ability. Gravehold suffers damage equal to the number of Fury tokens that Rageborn has. So Gravehold will start taking damage to this number of counters every time the Nemesis card flips over. So that's the Nemesis card, and you'll see it's the end of the round. So now we'll take these player cards here. We'll shuffle them up. And we'll start another round. Nemesis. Great. I wanted this to flip over just to show you how those monsters work. So on the Nemesis turn, we'll look to see if there's any cards in effect. All right, there is. And again, the persistence here was Gravehold takes damage equal to the rage counters. So our city will now take its first shot of damage. And you can see if these rage counters get going, they max out at 4, and then there's a special ability that takes place. And again, I'm not going to spoil that in case you ever play the game yourself. But you kind of have a lot of micromanaging with these extra abilities. In my experience, killing the minions have always been your key job, just where their effects can get out of control. You start having 4 of these out here, you know, this one does 2 damage, this one does 2 damage, this one does 2 damage, and next thing you know, your town's getting obliterated. Once you've done the cards in play, you'll then flip over and do another card. So this one says Cleave. Rageborn strikes. So there's no attack damage on this guy, but anytime he strikes, you're going to look at that strike deck. So we're going to flip this over, and he's razzing us. Strike. Gravehold suffers 3 damage, and any player also has to suffer 1 damage. Again, I apologize with the glare. You're not going to be able to read that. So Gravehold takes 3 damage. You have no choice about that, bringing it down to 26. Anytime it says a player suffers 1 damage, you have the choice. Brahma here is a healer. She wants to protect her younger students, so she's okay with taking the 1 damage. She brings herself down to 9. So you'll keep following these actions until either you've destroyed the boss you're fighting, until you've exhausted its entire encounter deck, or until both your mages are KO'd. So this game, again, super fun. I would never want to play it solo. I think it's just too much to manage. And even some of the thought processes here and trying to figure out this video for you guys provided a little unique experience. This game I've played at 2 players, 3 players, and 4 players, and I've enjoyed every player count. You'll notice that when we did our deck here, it was 4 player turns to a Nemesis turn. If you're playing with 3 players, everyone gets 1, and then you get a wild card. And then with 4 players, you know, everyone will have their own point that way as well. So it's always 4 turns to the 1 Nemesis turn, allowing for some balance that way. And you look at, well, if you're playing 4 players, you get less turns overall, which is true. So maybe your deck's slightly less powerful, but you also have 4 characters to spread out damage between. So in a 2-player game, there's 20 health between the 2 of you, right? With 4 players, that's 40 health. So you have a lot more sustainability as well. So I feel like the game's pretty balanced at all the player counts so far. Overall, Aeon's End, I think I've played 4, 6, probably about 13 rounds. of Aeon's End. At this point, I think we've lost twice, and the other ones were wins. That gives us 9 wins. But again, I'd say maybe 2 of those were clear cut. We obliterated, where the other 7 there were very close, biting your fingertips, saying like, who's going to win this game? Again, super fun. I recommend this for everyone. It can be a lot to see at first, which is partially why we made this video. But these mages are really fun. Aeon's End, the core box. This is your starting box. There's no narrative or story necessarily to this one. This was your official box battler. But after they did the first legacy version of this game, they started adding what's called an expedition mode. And that allows players to kind of play out a narrative. You start to have a bit more meaning behind these characters, the decisions they're making. And I know the Kickstarter that's currently live now is kind of the end game of this universe and this kind of act where all these characters you've met over these 4 copies of the game. There's Aeon's End, Aeon's End War Eternal, Aeon's End Outcast, Aeon's End The New Age, and then we have the Legacy of Gravehold just now live on Kickstarter. So really fun game. I can't say how much I enjoy it. I'd be repeat myself over and over again. But this game is unique, it's dynamic, and the fact you're not shuffling, first of all, means you don't have to sleeve it and the cards can still stay in good shape. I know some of you will always be sleevers. For anyone out there that's played Aeon's End before, let me know what you think about it, and also if you think this is a game you'd like to try sometime. This has been Kyle with Windy City Meeples. Please like, subscribe, all that good stuff. And in the next video, I'll actually be doing an unboxing of Aeon's End Outcasts, so I can show you guys what some of the components look like when you first open a box. Thank you so much. Take care.